All right, welcome to another episode of the Brown Perspective. I'm here with Eduardo, my co-host. How we doing?
Buenos días, buenos días, buenos días, buenos días.
And today we're very excited. We have a very special guest. We have
Woo!
my friend, good friend, Rogelio from back in the days. We go way, way back. How you doing, Rogelio?
Hey, Q, okay,
Trying to pass the time.
Trying to twiddle your thumb in different ways for
Yeah,
the quarantine.
pretty much.
Developing a new skill.
Yeah. So,
Hey, I'm gonna go back to playing those games that my parents used to try to get me to play that I never played, like el trompo and
Oh, sí. El yoyo.
yeah.
man,
What did they call the thing that you used to spin and it's toma uno, toma dos, toma todo? Did you guys ever play that?
yeah, I remember
You know what I'm
those.
talking about?
Yeah, I
Me
remember
acuerdo
those.
también de
I don't remember
la
what they're called.
pirinola.
Yeah, la pirinola. I think that's what it is.
There was a pirinola. And there was also the one with is it jacks? That you did the dice and then you make the ball bounce or something and you make the ball bounce and you catch as many things as you can, like
We call
two,
those.
three, four.
Is that a
Yeah.
valero? I don't know if the one that has the stick tied to the rope and then has
Yeah,
the
that's el
huge.
ballet. Huh?
Yeah, el valero.
That shit was so hard to do. I always like, oh, I can do it. But
We,
after a while, you got the technique down.
well, you know the Rogelio. You mentioned the trompo, and we used to play with those in Mexico too, and we couldn't buy them. Well, we could, but it was like a rare thing. Maybe you would get one for Christmas, and then by within a few weeks or a month, it'd be useless because maybe it would have broken or you would have lost it. So we used to just make them ourselves. And actually, when I was a kid, I was making one of those, and I ended up almost cutting my finger off because I hit myself. I was holding it with my left hand, and I had this huge machete on my right hand, and I was trying to make one. I was 7, 8 years old, and here I am trying to make it, just whacking away at it. And then my mom came out and she called me. She came out and she yelled, "Hey, breakfast is ready. Come and eat." And so I look at her and I say, "Ahorita voy." And
Ah,
as I'm saying that, I take the last I take
ah.
the last slash at the
Oh.
trompo, dude, and I got my finger. The only thing that saved my finger is that machete was so dull that
Yeah, it didn't work.
yeah, it hadn't been sharpened in ages. It was literally sitting in the backyard, and I just picked it up. But you know what it was? It was full of rust, so they had to
Yeah,
rush.
Oh my
it was
god.
all rusty, bro.
Yeah.
Did it get infected or what?
Well, they rushed me to emergency. I don't. I think they gave me a whole bunch of shots. I don't remember, but
Because then you have to worry about the tetanus.
yeah, I almost and you guys have, I don't know if you've seen it, but I have this huge scar across my left index finger, and
That's
I
what
have
it
seen
is.
it.
so
I
you've
have
seen
seen
it,
it,
right?
but
Yeah, I
I,
got like 7 or 8 stitches, and anyway,
Hashtag Rancho problems.
yeah.
Hashtag Rancho life.
Anyway,
I
let's
thought
get
that
go ahead.
I was gonna say that I thought you got that from when you were trying to learn how to play the guitar. You
Nah.
you started on the Jimi Hendrix too soon.
No, well, I think with the guitar, you're most likely to scar your face or maybe injure your eye if you pull the string too tight and then it rips
Off the screen.
and then you're just the backlash hit too. But anyway,
Yeah.
let me get back on focus here. So I wanted to just give a quick intro. Rogelio and I, we met in 1997, 1998. I was still in high school, and you, Rogelio, you were running. You had teamed up a with a specific program that was offering to. I think they were sponsoring kids to go to the hills in Malibu, and it was a weekend retreat, and it was specifically focused on Chicano youth, and it was like a Chicano youth empowerment program, and you were one of the volunteers slash facilitators, and I remember that's when I met you. So that was a long time ago now, and so I just want to give some context into how far back we go. And the reason why I mentioned that even back in 1998, you were already very active within the community. You were already thinking ahead of and thinking of how can I empower those in my community. So I think that's again that's something that's always been integral to you And so I want to talk a little bit about that and just tie that in again to this whole thing with the coronavirus and everything.
Wow, yeah. No, definitely. And I remember during that time that we met, it was there was a group of volunteers that were coming together to do work with at the time Sal Castro. Sal Castro, who some of you might know from the movie Walkouts, was the teacher at Lincoln Heights that led the walkouts. He had gotten a group of volunteers together and was still helping to organize youth leadership retreats in the hills in Malibu. And the purpose was to bring together youth from across Los Angeles that were Raza and were Latino youth. Specifically, he tried to target Chicano Mexican American youth and help raise consciousness in them and their communities. So there was a like it's always been done, a lot of volunteers that were coming together and raising money and putting together programming that allowed young people to have conversations and begin a dialogue that they could then take back into their communities, their high schools, which I found later in working with Sal that was kind of how the walkout started. So he started telling me about all the people that were in the movie, like Balak Crisostomo, and how they had gotten the idea for the walkouts as a part of a retreat that they had been to themselves. And so that's kind of how the conversation started. And he was telling me how kind of they were sitting around and
I can
talking
see
about what could be possible for them. So
yeah, I can see
I don't know if you can hear me.
yeah, I can hear. I can see that if Sal Castro, because he had a huge impact on the Latino community, but I can see that if he had gone beyond that, maybe even towards the political stage and running for some political office, I can see how they would have mentioned that first conference that you just mentioned, where he got the idea for a walkout, how they would try to spin that and say, and that's when he was radicalized, right? that's when,
Right? Yeah.
that's when he started learning these.
But it's pretty amazing because and it's such a wonderful insight, and I think I wasn't expecting this episode to go that deep, but like to actually know somebody who had direct contact with Sal Castro. And for me, again, I'm an immigrant from Colombia. I know a good amount of my Colombian history. I came to the U.S. I know a little bit of American history, but I don't know Chicano in history as much. So it wasn't until I got to college that I got to learn a little bit about the Mexican and Mexican American experience. And I know that this is one of those fundamental, one of the many experiences here in the West Coast in LA that really means a lot to the community. But just want to highlight the fact that what you're talking about is about, it's a social empowerment through intellectual empowerment that leads to economic growth and then eventually political power. So to your point, I think that getting into politics would have been his next step to try to bring about broader positive change.
Hey man, that's my bad, because when I sent you the message that Rogelio was going to be joining us, I should have said something more than he makes bomb ass tortas.
Tortas. Although I specialize in tacos, tortas, pozole, man. That's the thing right there.
That was going to be my Saturday brunch. That's why I was looking forward to this show. But this is just the dessert.
Yeah,
this is the little churro con chocolate at the end.
I should have done a better job with my little blurb on Rogelio. And I know that his involvement, even since back then, that was 98. And I remember specifically because I met you there, and then a few years later, I ran into you again when I applied for a scholarship program right before I went off to college. But you know what? Thinking back on that weekend in Malibu, where they took us there, and we were there for I think 2 nights. It was like, first of all, it was a great experience because being young, being 17 years old, and then meeting so many other Latinos, and then interacting with them, having that space just to yourself. And then they had groups, they had different seminars, workshops where they try to teach you about your history and all of that stuff. Now thinking back on it as an adult, even back then, you and I think it was another guy or 2 other guys that you guys were trying to stress to us the importance of reading and writing, and you even wanted to have like a small side workshop where we would work on our writing. And man, I didn't want to have any of that because I was too busy chasing girls and trying to talk to other people. And I think to myself, it's such a wasted opportunity because I think what frightens me is if you're gonna categorize the Latinos, I'm considered one of the successful ones, but
You made it, baby. You made it.
I wanted nothing to do, no interest in a workshop about reading or writing, which would have actually helped me a lot because it's not like I had stellar reading and writing skills.
Yeah, you were pretty good. I remember when you came to work on your college app the day before it was due at my house. Remember?
Oh yeah. Well, I had everything.
We were like, oh yeah, we gotta write this essay tonight, bro.
But what do you?
You were actually very good. You were a very good writer. You know.
Well, I was organized, but that helped me a lot. But I know that when I went off to college, I needed to do some catching up because I didn't have the access to the resources that other people may have had in better schools. But I also didn't help my situation by being thick-headed and not taking you up on that offer back then of, hey, let's have a writing workshop. Maybe something good will come of it. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is, if someone like me doesn't see the value in that, like how do we have hope that other kids are going to be able to see that? Like, how do you get through to them? It's such a difficult thing to do, isn't it?
It is, but I just want to, at this moment, like take some time to acknowledge what strengths you did have and the accomplishments that you were able to achieve at that age. Because sometimes when we begin to put the focus on what you didn't do, despite the fact that you were a straight A student, that you were living in South Central LA, you were getting jumped before you were getting to school and taking off on people's bikes that were trying to jump you. What we do is we end up taking the focus away on the system and the reasons why young people aren't able to say, you know what, I do need to strengthen my writing, because I recognize that although I'm good at manual arts, the level of writing that I need to be at to be able to apply, get into, and succeed at this university is a different level. So like we're not able to recognize that, and we're not able to put the onus on the system that are failing us. Instead, we put the onus on, like we stress out and we say, man, young people need to do more or need to do better, instead of saying like, what can we do to create a system that pushes young people to do more and do better, because we need the quality to be way up here. You can't see me, but I'm gesturing with my hands above my head.
Yeah. That's very high.
So I just wanted to acknowledge that you had done a lot, and bring it back to our conversation about how this ties into our community and the disproportionate ways that it impacts our community. Because even in what we were speaking about right now, I was thinking about how that conference was put together by volunteers. And so a lot of the work that I've always done has been as a volunteer. Like the things that I'm most proud of have always been things that I've done on my own. Like I continue to right now volunteer with youth. Every year I help youth apply to college still to this day. During the end of summer, fall, I'm helping students write essays, like students that don't have access to having help, like Becky from Full House, to pay for them to get into college. So a lot of Chicano and Latino youth are struggling to just find somebody to help them read their essays, and a lot of this work is done by volunteers, just random people that want to help, like you guys, right? Like you guys saw a need in the community, like for us to put our voice out there. And a lot of this work, like the Chicano Youth Leadership Conference that you're talking about, like is done by volunteers. Like it's done by people that are already taxed and spread very thin, but find that they have to do something to help our communities and help our people. And you end up like a lot of us that make it end up making it because there was somebody that was already stretched too thin helping us,
Yeah.
And it wasn't the system that helped us. And so we never put it back on the system. to say, you know what, like, why wasn't the school helping us? Why wasn't the university reaching out to us? Or, like, they should have known, like, our writing isn't too par, but we have potential. We have talent. We do want to go to, it's not that we don't want to go to college. It's just that we don't even know what it takes to get into college.
Yeah, the guidance is definitely lacking, and again, just because we're not exposed to a lot of people that have gone off to college, so it's hard to even have any idea of what options are out there. And that's probably where a lot of people get stuck in high school. You ask them, "Hey, what do you want to do after high school?" They say, "Well, work," or they'll sell you something, but in reality, it's just that I don't think they really know what their options are. And I'm not saying like if I knew, I didn't know what options I had either. I just knew that at least back then I'm fortunate enough that I knew that hey, just get good grades and go to college and something will come of it, right? I wasn't worried too much about what exactly it was that I wanted to do, but yeah, it's not knowing and that guidance is not there. But I do try to look inward to see, okay, despite the obvious shortcomings that we may have had in our school system and our education system, was I myself, could I have done a lot better? Were there things that were within my control that I could have done a lot better? And so you're saying that I mean, what level of responsibility do you put on having a good encouraging environment for students where they can succeed versus putting some, because sometimes kids are just lazy? Or do we say, well, they're lazy because somehow they got discouraged by the system because they don't believe in themselves to begin with? Like, how do you break that apart? And just at
Yeah,
some,
I think.
yeah,
Well, yeah. Just to answer your question a little bit, I think that of course there's young people that they lack motivation. Like you say, like maybe people see them as lazy, but I think it's kind of hard to assess what kids are being lazy and what kids what kids are being lazy and what kids just don't want to do something, and what kids like. It's hard to assess those things when you don't have a system that is preparing all people the same way or has the same resources for all people. Like, young people are coming to school and you're seeing what they're able to do in school, but you don't know the life that they're living in their house. Some of them, don't have breakfast, have parents that are not together, or that are fighting, or that are struggling with certain things, or like they come from, their family lives are completely different. So what they're able to do at school a lot of times depends on their family life. You know that as a parent, like, the quality of life that you're able to give your son is different than what other people probably are able to do. And I think until you have the same opportunities for everybody, it's kind of hard to say, okay, this person just didn't want to do it, or maybe this person needed to be motivated in a different way.
yeah, and that,
So I think we have to start by trying to make the access to resources and to the quality of, like, the system that people experience the same first, and then work backwards and figure out, okay, so, like, well, we know that they had an excellent teacher and they had an excellent education, and their stomachs weren't growling, so, like, it must be something else. But I don't think we're gonna get there. We've gotten there. You know what I mean?
yeah, I've had I've had a lot. I've had to deal with a lot of hard learned lessons in that regard, because I have a ton of cousins. It's like a lot. And just even the ones that are younger than I am. And I remember every single time I would talk to them and I would try to get them motivated about going to college or trying to go in that direction. So I could never get anywhere. It's so difficult. And so, the reason why I asked that question is, I mean, I know my cousins. I happen to know a little bit about them, about their personal life, and I know that they do have hardships, but tampoco they're not the ones that are, they're not starving in the mornings. They have food. Their moms cook for them. They have at least what seems like a decent, stable home, but yet I see the same pervasive attitude in them that I see in a lot of other kids. And so the reason why I asked you this is because there's something else going on, something deeper. And I even have this experience with one of my cousins. Eduardo, I may have shared this with you before, where
Mhm.
we're in Mexico, and again, Mexico is this small town. We go there for Christmas, and every single year we go around the same time. And so there's a lot of drinking. So we were in one of these cases. It's a group of us, like 4 or 5 of us, and we're just standing around having a few beers. And I saw one of my cousins, like a second cousin that I hadn't seen in a long time, and he was right at that age where, one more year, a year and a half in high school, and then he's on his own if he doesn't go to college, or he maybe has an opportunity to go to college. So I started talking to him about that. Hey man, how you doing? Like, are you thinking of going to college? Do you have any idea? Because I can help you. We can talk about colleges, and I can help you with the applications. I can help you with the writing, with all that stuff, making myself available to him. You know what he said to me? He said, "Hey bro, you're killing my buzz."
Oh, damn.
He said,
Which,
"Hey, bro."
by the way, that's a good comeback from him. It was actually really funny. Yeah.
He's living in the moment, but that's the issue. Which is nothing wrong with living in the moment, but I think you gotta understand that you gotta prepare yourself um, for what comes next. So you party hard, but you have to work hard. And I think Rogelio is getting something very interesting because I think we do. Um, when you think about it, so much of the change that happens, so many of the good things that happen in the communities because people volunteer because they feel it's so important that they need to give a little bit, they need to give probably their most precious resource, which is their time, to something that they really care about. And I think so much of the system does fall on the individual and individual communities. But I think now that there's a greater number of us who are now in a position of influence and who can not only volunteer but also give money or help guide policy or help ask questions and keep political, politicians accountable. I think the organizing, all that stuff. I think that it goes back to what Sal Castro was doing, to what Cesar Chavez did, to like what people in the resistance have done for so long, what indigenous communities are doing in Latin America, where African American Afro descendant communities here in the US and across Latin America are doing. They're getting empowered little by little, but like so much of it initially does fall on the community and community organizing.
Yeah, and I think that when we're talking about our community, the Latino community in the U.S., as diverse as it is, I think one of the things that I wanted to talk about in identifying how a lot of the success that happens within our community is because of the work that's done by people volunteering themselves, is that it's through these networks of Latinos helping each other that a lot of us are able to move ahead, either in business or in school, because we meet a mentor or a teacher or something. A lot of times it's us helping each other out, forming these networks where we are sharing our experiences and sharing our resources, creating additional pathways to success. Because a lot of times the traditional ways of finding success don't seem real to us. They don't seem like they're something that's within our reach. Like for your cousin, like you were mentioning, or I don't know if you said it was your nephew or your cousin.
Yeah, second cousin.
Um, yeah, like I think a lot of times for a lot of young people, college doesn't seem like a real option for them. For whatever reason, it doesn't even seem like something that they can do or even would want to do. Like, I have people tell them all the time, like, oh yeah, go to college, but they don't really see how that helps. Like, they're like, man, you know what? I don't even like school. Like, what are you talking about going to college? Because I remember I helped start some high schools in East LA, and after working with young people like yourself that were doing great, you guys were the top of your class, help, working with you guys to get into some elite schools. I started working with young people that had dropped out of school or were pushed
Mm.
out of school for various reasons. And I remember when I was talking to them about college, and they're like, "Dang, Mister, like you're talking to me about college. I don't even know if I can get a high school diploma, man. Like
Shit.
they were like, cálmate, cálmate. You're over here tirándome all this rollo about preparing myself and go to college and all this stuff and career, and they're like, I'm trying to get a high school diploma, mister, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And
And
that's
and
and
I think that,
Good.
that's where they're at in their life. You know, they're at a place in their life where I don't know what their circumstance. Well, actually, I know some of their circumstances were very difficult. Like they really were just trying to make it. They were trying to go back to school and get a diploma, and then later on, and I think during this like time, a lot of us, that's what we're doing. Like we're trying to survive. You know, like with this virus, we're trying to just make it right now.
When it comes to school, and again the youth that you were working with, I've always felt that a lot of the damage is done even before it's noticeable. By the time you reach high school and you talk to some of these kids that don't have any ambition or any goals of going to college, that's when you can actually see and you can try to work with it at that point. But whatever it is that let that person down that path, I actually think it happens way before, when they're younger. And what I'm talking about is, at some point these kids, for some reason, were not able to believe in themselves, that they had amazing potential, and that they should strive to reach that potential. And
Yeah,
there,
but I think there's so much trauma, right? There's a reason trauma, like the trauma of poverty, the trauma of being an immigrant, domestic violence, sexual abuse. There's a lot of trauma that happens in those circumstances that, yes, perhaps there's some personal responsibility, but to Rogelio's point, there's also a systematic like reason. Like, why don't these people have better access to educations? Why don't they have better housing? And I think that's what we're realizing now, that because at the same time, the people that are struggling the most right now are the poorest people. But as soon as we get past the virus, we get into the economic sector, cities and the country is going to have to cut down on services. And what services do you think are going to get cut? The services that service the people who are most vulnerable. So this is where people need to thinking about that and starting to organize to build the political power they need to protect the programs and the priorities they need.
Yes, and like to both of your points, like yes, I definitely believe that the most important thing that we can have, and I can probably, I can guess that both, you both of you believe that you were gonna make it. Like probably growing up, you felt like there was something inside of you that was pushing you and driving you because somehow or other you didn't know how, but you were gonna make it. You were gonna be a success or whatever, quote unquote, right? But you felt that, and I think that there are definitely systematic, inequalities that create a difference in how many of us are able to believe that we can make it because
I
of the things that we see every day. Because of like there's reasons why more of our families are separated, or more of us are locked up, or like there's a lot there's actual real systematic reasons why that happens.
yeah,
And I think that first we got to address those things so that more people in our community believe. And I think people find a way when they believe, like you said, like you I'm sure you guys both have overcome amazing things. I know that you've overcome like tremendous things, and I'm pretty sure that as an immigrant from Colombia, like there's no way that you didn't overcome amazing, incredible things, right? So I think that's the first thing we got to do is help people to believe, and then so that they can deal with the inequalities in the pathways that they're gonna walk.
and yeah, and that's what that's what I wanted to really tease out and get in, talk about that. And I wasn't, Eduardo, I wasn't trying to frame it as an issue of personal responsibility, or somebody taking personal responsibility for their actions. It's, I don't know if it came across that way. I think what I'm trying to say is that the fundamental problem that I see in a lot of cases, at least from what I've been able to extrapolate in my encounters with family members or other people, is that somehow this idea or this internal drive and people believing themselves was somehow taken out of them, beaten out, because you don't just lose that. You usually, if when you're young, you're ambitious, you're energetic, you have a lot of stuff, you lose that. That's something that you lose. And it seems to be very pervasive, at least in our community. And the only things, like, as I've always think about, okay, well, what is it? Why is it that some kids are able to overcome all these things, like you said, Rogelio, because they believed in themselves. It drives me crazy when I hear all of these conservatives, whether it's white conservatives or Latino conservatives, that made it. They're wealthy, they're well off, and then they start talking about personal responsibility, picking up yourself up by your bootstraps, saying, because they start believing their own narrative that they got to where they were because of their own doing, because they did it
Right.
themselves. Nobody helped them, and I'm like, really? Nobody helped you?
Right.
Really? Like,
Right.
dude,
Exactly.
it's like they don't
Because they
they
want to believe that, right?
yeah, well, don't they even realize that just the mere fact of not having somebody beat the motivation or their own self-esteem out of them was huge. That in itself is help. If your community didn't do that to you, then chances are you have a really good chance of being successful. But if your community is one where you internalize maybe that you're inferior, you internalize that you can't do it, for a whole bunch of reasons, right? Historical reasons, the whole slave trade, the Native Americans being looked down upon, all of that stuff stays with us. And so as you're growing up as a kid, you're exposed to all that stuff. You're told as a little kid that somebody that's born blonde with in a Latino community, because I experienced this with my younger brother, was born blonde. He had blue or green eyes. I don't know what the hell. He looked like one of those kids from the Mennonites, los Menonitas. And you should have seen all the praise and all the automatic acknowledgement that he got, all the positive stuff. And I was like, wait a minute. All of a sudden, just because he looks a certain way, people believe in him. But what do you think he's going to internalize if people are saying that to him? He's going to internalize that he's amazing, that he has potential. Well, what about all the other kids that are sitting nearby that are listening to that garbage, right? What are they going to internalize? Ah, shit, maybe I'm not as good as this kid. And then if they hear that stuff enough, then no surprise that by the time they get to high school, they may not believe in themselves. Because so it's our own community sometimes that's doing this. We're doing this to ourselves. This isn't a systematic problem that is external to us. Well, maybe it is, but within families, this type of shit happens. Because my mom makes comments putting down Native Americans. She says, "Oh, no seas indio." No, I'm like, well, why the hell is the word Indio a negative thing? So like little things like that, man. I think they just add up, and you end up. I'm not saying that's the only thing, but those things add up. So when I hear somebody say that they're self-made, I'm like, dude, come on. Self-made, you just believe your own stuff and you've never even thought about all of the help that you got, even if it's just from somebody that was there for you, a friend or a family member that believed in you. Yeah,
Yeah.
you guys are
You're like,
full of
man,
BS.
nobody's self-made. It's like that girl, that Kardashian, the youngest Kardashian, that she's the youngest billionaire, that
Yeah,
she's the
self-made.
youngest person that was a self-made billionaire. I was like, come on, she made herself a billionaire.
Nope. She was born into
Yeah, because
a
they
family
got
that was already, and obviously she got all that support.
yeah, right. Like they were like, but they're praising her that she's a self-made billionaire, the youngest self-made billionaire. I'm like, calmate, you know.
She
So that's
just
the same
perfected
thing,
the.
right? Like they have to believe, they have to justify why they have what they have, you know.
Well,
And
I don't know if they're justifying. I really believe that they believe their own BS. They're not in touch with that. It's so easy to forget. Like it's so easy to forget everything that, like, every little thing in different ways that people helped you. It's so easy to forget that and just start believing your own hype that, hey, I am great, I did do all this by myself. And we like to have like 2020 vision, and we like to project as to how we would have reacted. So we say, oh, well, you know what, like, me being who I am, even 20 years ago, if you would have put all this shit on my path, I would have gotten through it and I would have been successful no matter what. Like, really? If your parents would have abused you, physically abused you between 3 and 5 or 6, you think you would have turned out okay? Just something like that. Something as simple as the parent being alcoholic, fighting all the time, making the kid insecure. Like, there's so many different ways that kids can be damaged. and then these people just they discount all that, like, oh yeah, I'm self-made because nobody ever helped me. Like, wow, really?
Yeah, yeah. Nobody's self-made, man.
Yeah.
But I wanted to put back the onus of who are we, who are not blaming, but where do we say this is coming from? Because even with like your example in your family, like the system is white supremacy. There is a thing called white supremacy. Like, you don't have to take my word for it. You can go take a class in college. There's a lot of books that go get into it and evidence. Like, because sometimes people say that's not true, but look, there is we do live in a society where being white is valued more. Like, it's not my opinion. It's true. That's why your mom. But that's why I don't want to blame your mom, right? She's getting it from somewhere.
Well,
It wasn't like
one of my
she didn't come up with that on her own. You
one
know
of
what I
my
mean?
one of my
That your
buddies
brother was better because he was lighter. I've heard the same thing.
one of
My
my
sister
one of my
Pita was better
buddies
because she
sorry,
was lighter.
just really quick, just one of my buddies said it best, I think. He said the mind has been colonized. Not only the land and themselves were colonized, but the mind. A lot of people have their mind was colonized because they believe this stuff, like what you're saying about European being superior.
Yeah, that's the first place. Gramsci, hegemony. It's coming from somewhere, and what that does is that we end up like blaming ourselves and blaming us instead of blaming or figuring out what are the reasons that this is happening. And I feel like I want to, as much as I can, like, look at those things before I start blaming us, because I think after we address those things, and then, because I mean I agree with you when you were saying, like, some people are lazy. I think sometimes as human beings, like, there's times where we just act fucked up, like we do things that are wrong, you know and I think we got to own that as human beings. Like, there's things that we weren't our best, and I think that once once you try to set society as equal as possible and give everybody the same opportunities, then you can begin to say, okay, well, maybe some people didn't want it. They just didn't want to, you know.
And unfortunately, something as simple as being lazy, which again people have it costs. It's way more costly for somebody within from our background because of everything else that is already stacked up against. You don't get the luxury of being lazy because if people already, especially if people already stereotype you and see you a certain way, then the minute that you do something that fits within that stereotype, they might automatically label you. Whereas somebody else that didn't have that stereotype to begin with, they're given more breaks. So and I think this happens. I don't know who. I think it was what was that quarterback? One of the first black quarterbacks he used to play for the Steelers, Cordell Stewart. I think he was
Oh yeah.
he was in an interview and he was talking about this. And he said, "Look, if you're a black quarterback, there's smaller room for error.
Mm-hmm.
They're not
Yeah,
gonna keep you as a
that's true.
backup for very long, and they're not gonna keep you as a third stringer for very long. The way that they keep other non-black quarterbacks, it's the very same dynamic at play. That there's just less room for error for certain people than others, and unfortunately, it is very costly.
Yes, yeah, that's completely true. And they'll say, like, if you're black, like, and you're a quarterback, they'll tell you, like, the football players and coaches say, well, that's not traditionally a position where we've had black people, because that's the position where you have to think more. And they'll say that on TV. you're you're thinking, man, that's so racist, and they just see it as that's normal. That's crazy.
Yeah, and it's funny because obviously now we got to recognize that an African American, well, mixed race, right, half white, half black quarterback won the Super Bowl last Super Bowl, and probably the last Super Bowl we have, at least maybe, because we may not have football until 2021. And I know we have at least one 49er fan on the podcast. But that's the thing. Like, now he's showing that not only can he think like the the white quarterback, but he can move like a black quarterback, and that whole racial thing is bullshit. Like, the more diverse you are, the more connected you are, the better you're gonna be. And it doesn't matter, like, your race doesn't matter. It just matters like your ability and your courage and your ability to pursue your gifts, right? And if you can, you just need, to your point, an equal opportunity. And I think that's what, in some respects, the U.S. represents better than any country, certainly better than Colombia, because at least here there's more of an opportunity for people like myself to be able to make it. But to Rogelio's point, we need to make that so that more people like us make it. So that way, it's our community who has the opportunity to, you know, take it easy, to be able to enjoy the fruit of their labor, and be able to have the American dream, that is really the ability to work hard, spend time with your family, and enjoy life. You just want a balance. And obviously, it's nowadays, it seems like that dream is even further apart for some people.
You know what the racist will say regarding Patrick Mahomes? They'll just say, "Well, it was the white part of him that helped him. It was the white part that was doing the thinking, and it was the black part that was doing the athleticism."
Mm.
Look, they'll just justify it somehow.
Yeah,
They'll
they'll find a way to take credit.
yeah,
You know,
they'll
I do wanna say that, like on a side note, is that I think it's very I just as I was hearing you guys speak, I was thinking about how, like, it's so important to have a place where you can actually, where you can call out things that are straight up racist, because so much, like, one of the things that frustrates me is watching the mainstream news, and they're afraid. You have people in the White House saying things that are that are just straight up wrong, like lies, and they'll call them falsehoods, or they're afraid to say that they're lying, or that they're racist,
yeah,
and
just euphemisms.
and I think how powerful it is that you have spaces where that is being called out. So I
Hmm.
just wanted to acknowledge both of you for creating a place. I don't even know where these things are put, but like where things are being called out, because that's so important. Like, part of what we were doing at say, to go back to the conversation about the Chicano Youth Leadership Conference, is just creating a place where young people from LA were hearing Sal Castro talk about how during the Revolutionary War there was a Mexican that owned cattle that fed the troops at Valley Forge, because this brother Sal Castro he had gathered like years and years and years of facts, where he could point to specific people and events, where he pointed out the contributions of Latinos, specifically Mexicanos, like from the beginning of this country or before.
Hmm.
And I think, man, like, it was powerful just to hear those things and have them go into young minds and see what kinds of seeds those were gonna plant in them, and later, like, blossom into. Like, I think it's important that young people now, or people, are able to hear you guys and hear, like, reality. Hear, you
Yeah,
know what? Maybe it's not just us. Maybe it's also the system that is creating these inequalities. Maybe you're not just fucked up. Like,
yeah.
maybe there's a reason that that we do achieve, less, or like highlight the things that we do achieve
And
that
that
nobody else is highlighting.
and that's one of the one things that is rarely acknowledged, which is how much positive feedback individuals are getting about their culture, about their ancestors, those that came before them. Because African Americans have a month, right? A month where it's supposed to focus on that. And you even now you hear people complaining like, well, why do they get to have an African American month? And I mean, there really shouldn't be an African American month if they were trying to tell the story accurately. If they were giving each one an amount of education that equally acknowledge the accomplishments of those that came before them. But it just doesn't happen like that. I mean, from the time that somebody is growing up, you turn on TV and you go to the History Channel, what are you going to see? Well, you're going to see mostly everything's going to be Eurocentric. The Roman
Hmm.
Empire, the Greeks. You know, when they talk about the Greeks and the Roman Empire, they never tell you like all the stuff that these guys may have borrowed or built
From the
upon from
Egyptians.
the Egyptians, from the Babylonians, from the all the Persians, all the cultures, how much they actually got from Asian culture. So we're not getting any of that, and I do understand that again because the country was built by Europeans and that's what they focus on. But dude, at least like don't give me this BS that
Correction, buddy. The country was built by African slaves
uh,
and
yeah.
Native American people.
Yeah, see,
Indigenous. And
Rogelio.
there was a country and there was a country already.
Yeah, I know. Thanks for catching me. See, we're so hardcore here about calling BS. We call our own BS out, Rogelio.
That's right. I'm like, wait a minute, there was a country here.
That's just me repeating the line. Yeah, you're right. So they came, they got somebody else to they stole somebody's land and then they got somebody else to work it and then they claimed that they took all the benefits of it and then passed down that generational wealth to their descendants. But that's what they established, and so that's what they focus on. But
And
okay,
and,
well,
and that I'm
I'm
sorry, I was gonna say, and that goes back to what you were saying about how, like for us, we can work hard and we have less room for error and not get any credit. And then you got motherfuckers like Trump in the White House that don't do shit, are being lazy, and get all the credit. You
Hmm.
know,
yeah,
so
and
like they get the credit for building this country, but they didn't do shit.
you know what? I work in tech, and I always found this disturbing, but at the same time, this is just the reality of it. You know how easy it is for African Americans to get labeled lazy. Like, dude, like maybe one incident, or just one or two, and then you have incompetent Americans, white guys that completely incompetent, but they never get that label associated with them. They get the benefit of the doubt all the time.
Hmm.
And again, I don't say this to make excuses. I'm just for me, it's like, look, if people are gonna criticize stuff, at least like acknowledge the reality of the situation. Don't try to give me a BS that this stuff doesn't exist. Don't try to give me this BS of, like I was saying earlier about how the original invaders, determined correctly from Europe, set up this country, and then everything that you see is geared towards celebrating that heritage. They celebrate the Western heritage of Europe, and that's like 95% of what Americans consume. That's what we hear in school, in television, and everything. And so don't give me some BS if other people want to say, well, hey, I'm Mexican American, I'm African American. I want to hear more about the accomplishments of those that came before me, my ancestors. Like, at least like people have to be aware that most of what we're hearing is not about us. So don't complain when African Americans want or have History Month, Black History Month, because there's some people that do. And there's people that want to pretend like that's not the case. And that's really where I take issue. It's like, dude, come on. Really? Like that's not the case. They convince themselves that people like from Hispanic, from African American communities, they tell themselves, they convince themselves that these people are just making excuses. They don't want to work hard. They can't pick themselves up by their bootstrap. It's very dismissive, and unfortunately, being dismissive like that, it doesn't work well in that situation and in a lot of other. I would venture to say that the people that are dismissive like that, when it comes to these kind of discussions, they're probably not very good at a lot of other things. They may not be very good at staying in a relationship, at having a relationship with their kids, if that's the approach that they're going to take to trying to understand complex situations.
Yeah, because real life is work, man. Like everything is work. When you like love a relationship, things are work. I think people, they romanticize things or dismiss things, but things are work. And I think when you get into the nitty gritty of it, that's why it's easier for them to just dismiss things because they don't want to address it.
Yeah, unfortunately.
That's also a privilege, though, because in some ways, it goes to the privileged space, and they haven't been challenged, they haven't faced same issues. And not to say that I do think that white America certain parts of white America, because obviously there's a lot of white poverty in this country. People who in West Virginia who have always gotten the short end of the stick through the mining, through the contamination, so all that stuff. But the folks who are well off, oftentimes can can avoid those struggles. But I think they do have psychological stuff, things that come from not spending real time with their parents. Uh, I think they do have other issues, and part of that can also be not be able to face and be challenged on your privilege or on certain parts of life because you've had it so easy. So this is that type of experience can be hard for them.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned that about the struggling because we do make it a point in this show to highlight how we're not saying that the struggle is exclusive to some type of people because yeah, you're right. Regular white Americans struggle a lot too. But going back to what we were talking about, they have that support network that exists for them. It's so much bigger that even if they struggle, it's gonna take a lot more for somebody from a white America to for their self esteem to be completely destroyed because it doesn't work at the same scale as when somebody from another community is struggling. Like let's say somebody from an African American community, right? If what you're being taught in school is that your ancestors were slaves, they're not teaching you their accomplishments. They're essentially subconsciously or unintentionally sending the message that you're not as worthy or that you're not that you just don't have it in you the same way that other people do. And so that is again just one dimension of how if that same individual is struggling, a lot of these things get internalized and you may end up just going down this spiral. Whereas if somebody, a white kid in second grade is struggling, none of that stuff, like he's not going to question his own identity. He's not going to question his own abilities just because somebody bullied him or somebody made fun of him. Like there's more what's the word? There's more resilience there because the entire culture serves as a social network support group. It doesn't even have to be relatives. Again, like whatever is in media, they have such a huge safety net to draw upon. Like let's say that you're a kid and all of a sudden your confidence is destroyed. Like what do you look to motivate yourself? To what do you look to feel proud and to get a sense that you're worthy, that you can accomplish things. Well, if it's not being taught to you and you don't have a lot of role models, there's very little. But if you're from another culture and you know your whole history and you know about characters and stuff, you can read books. You can. There's so many different ways to distract yourself and escape, and then still find those figures in life that can motivate you. And so,
Yeah, and that's what Sal Castro, Rogelio were trying to do. I mean, I think for our community, it goes from it's not individual resiliency, it's community resiliency. And to your point, it's made by creating those types of spaces where we can have these types of conversations. And when you have people like Rogelio and other volunteers who can share their perspectives, and it's intergenerational too. It's like, hey, this is what I struggle with. This is how it was my experience. I know you don't have to struggle that way. If you're struggling this way now, just know that's going to get better. If you're not struggling like I am, that's good. That means you're ahead. So what I was saying was that I think that in our community, many of us don't have that individual resiliency. So that's why the community resiliency is so important. And that's why it's so important the work that volunteers and leaders like Sal Castro, like Rogelio are doing to volunteer and create those spaces where our youth can see role models, can get ideas of what their lives can be after, so they can see a future and probably a future that's even brighter. So I think that's why community resiliency, volunteering, learning our own history, like getting to understand who we are and be proud of the people who we are. The fact that we are such a rich mixture of indigenous roots, African roots, European roots, and that everything in between too, right? So how do we build our self-esteem, our worth, both as individuals and community by by volunteering and giving back and paying it forward.
So we need people like Sal Castro and Rogelio, as you were saying, but we also need people to constantly push back on these generational stereotypes that our own culture has. So when my suegro comes around and he says, "Ah, está bien moreno tu hijo," or he says stuff like that, I tell him to get the hell out of here when he says stuff like that. I mean, I don't tell him that, but I try to correct him because I don't want none of that stuff around my kid. I don't
Mm-hmm.
want if I catch somebody saying anything that implies that somehow dark skin is inferior to light skin, dude, I'm not. It doesn't matter where it is. It could be at a
Mm-hmm.
party. It could be at a social event. It could be in public. I'm gonna say something to that person. I'm gonna put him on the spot. I've done
Hold
that
up.
before. You gotta call them out, man. I mean, this stuff has
Yeah,
to
you do.
stop. It's
Yeah,
insidious.
I think that although you understand that that stuff is internalized, and you can understand why, say, for instance, your suegro might be saying those things, and that in his mind he doesn't mean anything. Like, you do also understand that it does damage and it does create a sense of less value, you know.
Yep.
And I think that that's what we're fighting. I think we're all fighting to. It's really interesting to me how we try to legitimize how we have value. You know,
Mm.
even we even use we even in our communities we even use like say for instance I'll give you an example. I have when we have nieces and nephews that are dark skinned that feel less because they're dark skinned, right? A lot of times I've heard people tell them, "Oh, you know what? Like, don't feel bad. Like, también estás bonita porque estás morena, you know, or you're also pretty because you're black." Look, white people, they try to tan themselves because they want to be black. That's what they tell them, right? So they're telling them like, you know what? Like, you do have value because white people want to look like you. That's why you have value, because white people like you.
Right.
And I think that's so deep, you know?
the
Like, even the way that we try to create value is by saying that we have value because white people like us.
by
You
that's
know?
value by association.
That's crazy, you know? So I
It,
think that all that stuff like is internalized, and we begin to accept those things, and then I'm sure it has an effect on us, you know. So I think, when do we just begin to accept people and accept that as human beings we all are deserving of having value. We all have value already. You start off with value, you know.
yeah, and I think you get into the point of it's about loving ourselves. So it's not even that we're equal, but it's just that we're beautiful, right? Like indigenous is beautiful, black is beautiful, being brown is beautiful, being the culture that we are. So it's not only calling out racism, but it's also being anti-racist. And actually, I read a really good book by Ibram Kendi, How to Be an Anti-Racist, and it's basically like that, right? It's sort of like the third way that we learned back in school about the third alternative, where people's differences are not simply ignored or try to erase, but they're appreciated. And that experience of struggle, that experience of racism, homophobia, whatever it was, like that helped you be a resilient person. But that's who you are. Like you are all those things, and you're beautiful the way you are. You're important the way you are, and just accept people. And if you're not like that, don't judge them. Just accept them and move along with your life. So I think it takes a conscious effort to try to be not only against racism but being an anti-racist and calling it out. So kudos to you, Romero, for being able to do that. And I think we all need to do that in order to continue to call them out and bring about that awareness that's so important.
I get in trouble for being like that sometimes. I'm not supposed to. I'm not supposed to call people out and make them uncomfortable. So
Just a little bit. You just got to do a little bit, like with a joke or something. And then it depends on the aggression, because if it's something that's really racist, then you got to call it out right away.
no, it's
Um,
never like that. It's all these like subtle things. It's
yeah,
the subtle
exactly.
ones that get by. because it's not just my mom, and it's not just my suegro. It's the suegra as well. It's the uncles. It's, at some point you realize, man, Mexicans are even more racist than white people sometimes. It's just
Well,
they get
same
a
thing goes for Colombians too.
yeah, they get a pass though, and this is what actually, I'm not taking their side, but a lot of white Americans get pissed off at that because they see the hypocrisy sometimes in other communities labeling them racist, but the racism, it affects. I mean, true to our point, it affects everyone the same. There's I know that racism systemically is a different thing. If you talk about the powers of institute to use institutions to enact certain laws that can create systematic differences, I understand that, and the power here is within the white community. But the shortcomings that we have in our inability to empathize, and so we discriminate and we're biased. Like, everyone is guilty of that, and a lot of the times, a lot of the racism that I was exposed to, not me directly, but a lot of the racism that I witnessed was in my small town in Mexico. It's like all these men, machista sexism too, really bad sexism, but also racism against black people, against darker skinned Native Americans or indigenous. So yeah, just calling it out. I just not to give these people a pass, but when I do hear that stuff, I do call it out. Especially, and I don't just do it around my kids. I've been doing it for a long time, especially if it's little kids. If somebody makes a comment like that, I'll try to say another comment to neutralize the harmful comment. So if somebody makes a comment that implies that white is better, I'll just say something else to neutralize that, so that it doesn't become internalized as white is better.
I think that one of the things that I think about too, when that happens, I feel like um, I'm trying to think about how these conversations sound in terms of other people. Like
Hmm.
how other people hear us talk about. Um, like for instance, I'll see online that we need to call out racism in our community, right? In Latino communities, right? Which I think exists, right? I think there is that, but I think like going back and 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 trying to point out that this 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 system of white supremacy um, benefits certain people, and it has always benefited certain people. So even when in our community people are trying to feel better, because I think a lot of it, I don't know, this is my own opinion, right? I think a lot of times there's not a lot of things that we feel proud about. So I think even in our community, like people that are lighter, that say you have a sibling or a child that's white and has green eyes or blue eyes, like they feel proud of that, right? They feel like, oh, I have white skin, blonde hair, blue eyes, and that's something that they can feel proud of. So, but they got that from a system, a place that tells them that they have more value because they have that, right? So, like, it's hard to blame somebody that wants to feel proud of something, even though they didn't do anything to get white skin or blonde, like blonde hair, like but they are living in a community where maybe there's not a lot of things that they're proud of, or they don't have a lot of things. Maybe they're light skinned and blue eyed and they're poor, you know.
Yeah, and
But at least that's something that they can feel proud of. So like, I guess I'm trying to balance like how angry I am at them for being like say quote unquote racist, right? When I know that there's a system that is making them think that way and feel that sense of
yeah,
I'm
well,
better than. And so
they're
what I want to do is I want to target my anger not at them for doing that, but realize like that there's a reason why they think that, and I can't really like be mad at them, but I am how somehow figure out a way to channel my anger at the things that perpetuate this false idea that white is better.
and but what you're saying is that they're victims within the system as well, even though they
Kind
are
of. yeah, I don't want to call them victims, but I think they are. Like they're. I feel like they've internalized that, and that creates some kind of damage. Because I think
Well,
we do have some kind of damage when we feel that white is better. You
well,
know, because
I mean to.
why is something better than us? You know.
Yeah, I mean to say that the victims in the sense that something is happening outside of their control and they're not aware of it. And so in a sense, yeah, they are victims to the system. It's just that it benefits them, but they're not aware of how they are being influenced by it, to a certain
Well,
extent. They
I
just
No,
mean,
and I know why you said that, and I agree with you. I just didn't know how to say it. You know what I mean? Like, but I feel like there is something. Oh, yeah, there's something wrong, right? There's something wrong with 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 thinking that you're better because of the way that you were born. You know?
yeah, and but I just want to point out the fact that it's really the problem here is the system or the dynamics is
Exactly.
those who are power and powerless. But I
Yeah.
think that also realizing that what we're talking about now is sort of this power play with the lens of white people. But I know that in the Inca Empire, once there was the first Inca who started the Inca Empire, started bringing together the tribes. There was also a differentiation between, okay, whoever's from that royal blood is special because they're the son of God, and they're the ones that are meant to rule and who taught us how to plot how to structure our society. So all that to say that the Inca, the Aztecs, and so many other people did have their power differentiation, power dynamics, and the belief that the class in power was superior because either deity or whatever, or that was just the way it is. And it just so happens that um, so we as native people use that dynamic to an extent, and it's a tribal thing, right? So, and now the fact that is the white power dynamic, the Eurocentric one that is controlling, but it could easily, it could become a Chinese one or whatever the next dominating perspective is. But I think all people, it's all about like a power play. Who has power? Who doesn't? How can I, um, protect my things and help the people who believe like me, who look like me, stay in power and control resources.
Yeah.
yeah,
From the beginning of time, people have been legitimizing why they deserve and other people don't deserve because God told them. You know, God made them special.
and we don't even have to go to the beginning of time because I've thought about this a lot. I think 10, 20 years ago when I would always see the contradictions or at least the irony in observing microcosms of the system with all its flaws that it has. You observe those same it's you observe that as a microcosm within a family, the way that a family is structured, the way that it
Yeah.
runs within a husband, a wife, and kids, how that is set up, right? I'm not saying all of them, but you see it very often where somebody manages to set it up in such a way that they benefit more than somebody else. Like traditional Mexican families in the small town where I grew up, well, the husbands had a ton of privilege because all they had to do was go work. And then the mom stayed at home and took care of the kids, did all the housekeeping and cleaning and so forth, feeding the guy. And then, they would say, well, yeah, we have roles, right? So the man has to work and then the woman has to stay at home because that's just the way that we're going to set up this partnership because that's what it takes to survive. But that role was really unjust because all it did was it made the woman dependent on the man. Even though the guy is the one that's breaking his back working, he has all these other freedoms because you know what they would do? They would go and mess around with other women, and they would go and have affairs and have kids with other women, and their wives could not do a goddamn thing about it because she was completely dependent on him. Dude, that's even way worse than, I mean, at some level that's the same power dynamic that we see in a larger scale with society. And I always thought,
Yeah.
like, don't these people realize, because this is the same husband, this would be the same family that would complain about the power dynamics of like of the rich, or the power dynamics of Eurocentric viewpoint. I'm like, don't you realize how you repeat those same mistakes yourself, or how you like play that same game. I always found that interesting. But you see it everywhere. Like you were saying, the power dynamic, it gets recreated over and over because we're human beings. And unfortunately, when we talk about the system, because I don't really make a distinction between the system and individuals, because it's individuals that perpetuate the system. So unfortunately, if we're going to change the system, we have to change the individuals, because the next generation, they're going to be the ones that are going to be setting up whatever system comes in place like decades from now.
Yeah. No, yeah, definitely.
All right. Sorry, I don't know if I.
You blew our minds, man. You blew our minds. It's true though, but I mean, again, it starts with the individual, goes to the family. The good thing is, I feel, and I think to end it on a positive note, I think that um, we've improved, right? So I think as a Latino community, we're becoming more united, more appreciative, more accepting of not only our indigenous roots, our African roots, our also homosexuality, transgender, all that stuff. So becoming more enlightened, more educated. And I think right now, we are in relationships where are more balanced, right? Where that power is distributed. I mean, I think there's still some unevenness, but where we know that, you know, um, I work but I also help out with the house. I have things in the house I take care of. And, my wife works, but she also cooks. So it's a more balanced, more approach. So I think our kids, our family, our, nieces and nephews, others are starting to see a better model for what life can be and what a healthy relationship, a healthy family can be. But there's always going to be drama. There's always going to be traumas, things like that. But that's part of the growth, right? And it's just working through those things out. And so I do feel more hopeful that we are getting to a place where not only we're getting to live that reality, but show that reality and hopefully help other people live in a better reality. And I think that's going to be even more necessary. We got to be more intentional about that coming out of the coronavirus because it's gonna get ugly. It's gonna get ugly. I mean, I'm hoping for the best. I think it's gonna be different, right? It's gonna be unprecedented. So I think this is where we need to kind of come together more than ever.
Love the past
Yeah,
positive attitude. Rogelio, do you have any final thoughts before we wrap it up?
I just wanted. I mean, I agree. I think that you know, I, in addition to that, like I feel like I think it's important to acknowledge the small steps, like you were saying right now that we are making as a community, especially during this time that things are going to get harder for us, especially because more of us are being impacted because of the less resources that we have. Um, so what I was saying was I feel like it's important to acknowledge um, the small steps that we have already made and that we're going to continue to make because for me, the fact that like we continue to exist on this land, like
Hmm.
for 500 plus years, like we have faced an onslaught of systematic oppression, man. Like they've tried everything, like to literally like kill us through war, through disease. Like everything has happened against our people, and still we are
They're
here.
here.
You know what I'm saying? And I think that's powerful. We
Yeah.
gotta acknowledge that, and how like in our communities, even though some of us are more recently arrived on this particular land, we struggle and we build community first with our families, like our wives, our children. Like we work together as a team to try and make it somehow on this land. And I think it's important to acknowledge that, man. And I think we like if we're still talking about like systems and we're still talking about education and we're still talking about even technology, like despite all that, like I think I'm pretty proud of us.
Amen.
Love it. Yep.
The human factor.
Yeah. Like
Good.
look at you guys are putting us out on podcast now.
We're working on it. We're
Worldwide.
That's crazy. You know what I mean? Like think about it. Like these fools have been trying to exterminate us for 500 years, and now you guys are like putting podcasts out.
we're, we're trying our best.
True.
And
That's
so
pretty cool. I'm proud of you guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I think we'll wrap it up at that. So, hey, Rogelio, thanks a lot for joining. I think we should definitely do it again another time if you'd like to come on and talk about, because there's just so much, right? There's so much that you can share with us about your experience. So whenever you want to, you're more than welcome to join us.
Hey, for sure, man. I'm always down to come on and say whatever comes out of my mind.
Next time we'll swing by, and then we can have some tortas like the ones you made last time, the pollo, and they were so good, man.
Hey, man, tortas.
I'll bring the mineral water. That's my contribution.
Hey, tortas for sure, bro. If you want it.
All right, guys.
All right,
Thanks a lot. We'll leave it
all
at
right,
that.
man.
All right.
Take it easy, guys.
See you.
All right.